Books are meant to challenge our perspectives, but oftentimes we find ourselves reading the same books that just bolster our perspectives that we already have. Reading books that we agree with can help us develop our arguments more thoroughly, but it's a double-edged sword. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk about books, habits, and health. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about why it's dangerous to read too many of the same type of book. And by the way, I'm 100% guilty of this. The vast majority of the books that I read are written by white, cisgendered, heterosexual males. But it's rare that I read a book by one of these authors that actually gets me to change my perspective. Out of all of the books that I've read, there are two that stand out that have actually challenged my perspective in a way that has made me a different thinker. The first one is The Vegetarian Myth by Leah Keith. And in this book, what Leah did was she showed me that there's a lot more nuance to be had when it comes to a vegetarian versus a non-vegetarian diet. Death is required in both of these. There are ethical implications, and it really helped to expand my perspective as to what a vegetarian diet actually entailed and how beneficial it actually is. The second book is The Giver by Lois Lowry. Now, this for a while was my #1 favorite book, and before this book, I wasn't really into fiction. I thought that fiction books were not as interesting as nonfiction books because I couldn't learn as much from them. And through reading The Giver, I learned that there is a ton of lessons that you can learn from fiction books, and sometimes a message packaged in a fiction book is a little bit more salient or easy to digest than it is in a non-fiction book where it's just spoon-fed to you. You actually internalize the lessons instead of reading it and then letting it just go to no use at all. So both of these female authors in their respective books challenged my worldview in some way that has meaningfully impacted my life. Reading both of these books, which initially I had gone into with my guard up and I was a little bit averse to, has shown me that opening my perspective and reading outside of my regular diet of books can actually improve my life at a faster rate than just reading the exact same books over and over and over again. That being said, I do think that there is benefit to reading the same types of books again and again, but to a certain degree. For example, I've been reading self-help for, let's call it 6 years, and for the first 5 years of reading self-help, all of those books just became shelf help. I read the lessons in the book, I thought that they were nice, I have a whole bunch of quips that I can just break out at any time, but I wasn't actually embodying the lessons in those books. And now having heard those lessons over and over and over again, I'm starting to enact them in my own life. I kind of relate this to a marketing term called the Rule of 7. The Rule of 7 basically says that in order for a buyer to actually purchase your product, they need to be sold it 7 times. Now, the number 7, there's nothing particularly magic about this number, but basically what they're trying to get across is that you need to be presented with the same messaging over and over and over again for you to actually internalize and digest it. The repetition is extremely important for digestion, but it can be overdone. For example, The Giver was the very first dystopia that I ever read, and I gained a lot from it. I learned about kind of how our society is moving in the current state of affairs and where that could potentially end up. And it serves as a cautionary tale to help us kind of better understand our position as a society, what we should try to value moving forward in order to make sure that we don't end up in a place that we don't want to be. Now, recently I read Fahrenheit 451, which is another great dystopia. But because I have read so many dystopias since The Giver, I pretty much knew exactly how this book was going to end up. The main character becomes curious about society and learning, and they decide to exercise this curiosity and break out of the cultural bounds. And they read things like Shakespeare and they take on different perspectives and everything is wonderful. But this is a story that I've heard a million times at this point. It's kind of like the hero's journey of dystopias. Every single dystopia tends to lead exactly in this direction. And because I've heard this story so many times, I didn't really enjoy it and I didn't get a lot out of it. So reading Fahrenheit 451 was a great indication to me that I've been reading a few too many dystopias and it's time to mix it up and challenge my perspective. Because of that, I intend to read outside of my normal comfort zone in the coming months and years to come. So if you have any suggestions for me as to books and authors that would challenge my perspective, please leave them in the comments down below. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.